Welcome to the Church Leaders Podcast, conversations with today's top ministry leaders to help you lead better every day. And now podcasting from scenic Colorado Springs, Colorado, here's your host, Jason Day.
Hello and welcome, friends, to the Church Leaders Podcast. I had the opportunity to speak with a pastor this week who just returned from a pretty amazing experience that gave him a first-hand look at the Migrant Caravan traveling through Mexico. Gavin Rogers serves as the associate pastor at Travis Park United Methodist Church in San Antonio. He's a native Texan and a graduate of the Divinity School at Duke University. On this week's episode, Gavin shares his personal experiences as he traveled with the Migrant Caravan, including the stories and motivations of those he encountered. We discuss how we, as ministry leaders, can respond to this issue and the importance of opening up healthy dialogue even when we all do not necessarily agree. So it's a fantastic episode. Really encourage you guys to take time to listen in and share this with your ministry team. So please, won't you join me now in my conversation with Gavin Rogers. Gavin, welcome to the Church Leaders Podcast. So excited that you were able to take time today to spend with us, and I'm excited for our listeners to hear a little bit of your heart. So welcome.
Well, thank you for having me. It was a surprise to see the article about my journey on Church Leaders. I love it when you don't have to talk to anybody, and it's still one of the most accurate stories out there. That says a lot about y'all's heart and coverage. So
love that. We certainly appreciate that, brother.
Yeah.
Listen, so let's talk a little bit about your journey. You've spent some time in Mexico recently traveling with the Migrant Caravan. Can you start by sharing a little bit what prompted you to kind of make that trek and get involved in that way?
You know, I have been a minister in San Antonio for 10 years, and most of that time I've been doing ministry with the homeless in some form or fashion. And the last 4 months I've worked at Travis Park Methodist Church, which is in downtown. And we have a huge homeless population here. Out of the Sunday attenders, maybe out of the 600 or 700 who are here on a Sunday, 400, 500 will be homeless.
Wow.
Right? And so I've always had a heart for kind of living in solidarity with those on the street, with those in the poor. And I've done that for a while. And so recently, though, in San Antonio, there's been an increase in the last maybe 2 years of immigrants coming through San Antonio out of the ICE detention centers, right? So detention centers in Brownsville, McAllen, Tilly, all these different detention centers. And so previously, the ICE was just dropping them off and just saying good luck. We've solved that problem, but in the last year, we've just seen a lot of people come through the Greyhound station with tickets. Before, ICE would just drop them off. Now they let organizations like the Interfaith Welcome Coalition know they're coming through. And we have an organization, or not we, but we're a part of an organization that helps care for immigrants. And so the last 2 weeks, we saw a huge increase on the daily number of people inside the Greyhound station, which normally there's about 40 or 60, and we were seeing 100, 200 people a day. And the rumor was, we don't know if this is true, they're clearing out for the caravan. That at that point was still probably in Guatemala or Honduras, or maybe South Mexico. And so I was like, okay. I mean, I heard about that, and I heard about the caravan that began. So we kind of tracked it for a while and saw that it was getting closer, and the rhetoric of the election was getting hotter. And so honestly, about 4 days before I flew out on a Friday, I just talked to my senior pastor, and I was like, hey, I kind of want to go down there. And we kind of talked about it, and he was like, all right, and I was able to time it around where I didn't have to miss most of my work with the homeless, and flew down there on a Friday just to learn and live in solidarity with those around us. Acts of solidarity, there's not a lot of planning involved. It's almost improvisational. It's almost fluid. And so therefore, I went down there just to hear stories and walk among, and kind of come what may. I wish there was more of a plan other than I wanted to learn more about the caravan. I wanted to learn more about how we could probably help in a situation. But more importantly, I wanted to hear stories from the people from Honduras, from Guatemala, from El Salvador, that I wanted to hear their side of the story. I wanted to hear their background and their life. And we weren't getting a lot of that in clear ways through the media, through social media, through all different forms of communication. So it was just really just kind of a way where I'm a single guy who can jump on a plane and get down there. So if I'm it's almost why I'm an associate pastor, is I can kind of get away with that kind of stuff. And we made it happen.
That's awesome.
At the time, we thought the caravan was coming to Texas. Not almost until a week ago did I learn, even when I was down there, did I learn they were not going to Texas.
Okay.
Even that Friday night, I still assumed they were going to walk toward Texas because it's much closer.
Right.
But they wanted to take a safer route to Tijuana, which it's a safer route. I don't know if Tijuana is safer, but the route to the border it's much safer to go on the western side of Mexico.
Right.
And so my first mission trip was to the country of Honduras when I was in junior high. I went to Spring Woodlands Church of Christ just in the Woodlands, Texas. And we went down to Tegucigalpa. And then a year later, Hurricane Mitch came. And then the next maybe 10 mission trips I went on was to a town in Chulateca, Honduras that was devastated by Hurricane Mitch. So I had a connection with Honduras, and I thought, well, let's go hear these stories. And hearing from ministers that are better connected in the immigration circles than me said that a higher percentage than normal of this caravan, those from Honduras, are evangelical Christians or Protestant Christians.
Really?
And so that kind of struck a chord with me, and thought, well, why is that?
So you had the opportunity. You went down there. You spent time staying in solidarity, marching, walking in solidarity with all these families that are making their way to the border. In the midst of that, can you kind of share with us, speaking to pastors, ministry leaders, from a pastor's perspective, in the midst of all that, what was going through your mind as you encountered these people, as you learned more about what they were experiencing?
Well, the Christian faith, to begin with, follows a Savior that was an immigrant. Like, that's not really up for debate, right? Mary and Joseph fled King Herod, acts of genocide, and they fled, right? So we even start there in our Christian faith. In the scriptures, Jesus tells us to love your neighbor as yourself, to welcome those who are poor, to feed and clothe those who are hungry and naked. We have all those scriptures in Matthew 25, right? But here's the thing. In the Old Testament, it even kind of has stricter language. In Leviticus, it says to welcome those who are foreigners into your land like native born, or you can translate that into blood relative, right? To welcome the foreigners into your land, it says and also Deuteronomy and Leviticus, because you were once foreigners in a land out of Egypt, right?
Right.
There is a lot of immigration going on in our faith, and I think that's like kind of undeniable. So I really wanted to come with that perspective and just live among and to tell people, even if with all I could do is just say you are loved. We are listening to you. There are many people in the Christian faith that care deeply. And that was kind of probably my Christian focus, right? I had two probably reasons to go down there, my Christian faith and also just wanting to learn as a citizen who is concerned about how we embrace all immigrants. So weirdly enough, it ties in quite nicely to the Christian religion and being a pastor.
Right.
You really can't go wrong there.
Can you share maybe a couple stories of some of the people or some of the families that you might have met? Kind of give us
Sure.
Just a little snapshot, a little sneak peek into the reality of their lives and their stories.
Yeah. When I arrived on Friday night, I didn't really know what I was going to do. But then I found out through some friends that are down there that the main part of the caravan was still in the Mexico City shelter, and we should go down there and talk to people. And we were talking to people there. We were listening to families and mothers who were carrying infants by themselves. We met full families together. We met individual men and women who were traveling down there, and all of them were always fleeing extreme violence, extreme poverty, a combination of those two, militarization. I mean, Martin Luther King says you have a problem, right, when you have poverty, militarization, and racism, right? Mm-hmm. So all those three things you can associate to this issue. And we heard exactly those stories. And we were meeting people that were fleeing. They even some groups called it an exodus, not a caravan, right? Certain groups, like People Without Borders, calls this an exodus. Now, I know that's debatable. I know that is definitely needs to be talked about. But I thought that was an interesting kind of language we were learning. And so the people there, for the first day, I was just listening to stories, listening to people, and connecting with them in really genuine ways. We would ride along with them in the backs of trailers that were refrigerated and opened air, and just listening to people. But then day 2, it was a game changer. I didn't know if I was going to continue on or just be like, let's go back to the shelter in Mexico City, kind of learn from more southern groups in the caravan. But I was like, no, I think I need to spend one more day. So I slept in the shelter about three hours north of Mexico City, woke up at 4 a.m, started walking out of the shelter onto the streets again, heading north. And usually you catch a truck, you catch some type of transportation after walking some distance. And this was, we were kind of striking out, and thousands of people were striking out. And then finally at a toll station, trucks started arriving that were just on the route north. And I jumped on like this double length semi-truck trailer, and they stopped, and hundreds of people started piling on the truck. And I thought, okay. And so I climbed on with them, and I didn't know if they were going to tell me to get off or not, but they kind of started reaching for me and pulled me on and found me a spot and sat next to these kind of young adults. There were some families on this truck. Most families go a little slower. Most families find with children, find ways to probably not ride on something like that, but there were still babies on that thing, but mainly young adults. And so I had a conversation with them for about 3 hours, learning their stories, watching them commune with one another, sing songs, share food, and just keep heading north. And that's when I started bonding with the friends that I met. They were ranging from the ages of 15 to 28, average age probably 21. And the 15-year-old, she would be in my youth group here at Travis Park. I'm not a youth minister, but she would be in our youth group.
Right.
And that was just kind of mind-boggling to experience. But I was sitting next to her closely, but she was really worried about me. So she wrapped her arm through my backpack and jacket, and people's legs were all kind of crisscrossed because people wanted to stay safe. And they put me into that. They didn't just say, oh, sit here and you're on your own. They embraced me fully, fed me when I didn't have food, gave me water when I didn't have water. And I'm an American just on this journey with them with really no need to do so. Because they just saw, if you are a stranger, if you are somebody with them, you're a family, you're going to be treated like family. There's no asterisk attached to that, Right. And so therefore, that's when I realized I was learning something much more than just hearing stories of why they were leaving, horrific stories. But that's when I started realizing the love they had for even the stranger, which ironically lives in a country that may not give them the same type of love back. And I also learned that group of students, or the group of young adults, were from Chulateca, Honduras, the city I did my first mission trip in Honduras, which really kind of puts an idea of what's the Christian response to a people that many of them's first interaction with religion, or a new interaction with the religion, the evangelical faith and their Christian faith, were from American missionaries saying how much they loved them. They were doing puppet shows. They were doing VBSs, building houses after Hurricane Mitch. All this care and attention, saying you are loved, right? And they're probably wanting to say, I'm going to that country where I was loved. The people that were from there always said that they were for me, that they would never abandon me, right? And that was haunting, to realize that maybe some of the people that evangelized to them may not have the same feelings if it was the other way around. And that was haunting to me, to kind of experience that irony.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Let me back up just a little bit. You said that as you came into the stop and you jumped off the truck the first time, that a lot of the caravan kind of stopped there, but some people were going on. So you jumped back on and you went further with this group of kind of young adults. Were they still part of the caravan at that point?
They
was
joined
it just
back up later. They joined back up in Guadalajara. Already met back up in Guadalajara, and now they're in Tijuana. They're pulling into Tijuana right now because they scored a bus caravan, or the government finally was like, we're just going to bus you to Tijuana if that's your goal. But no, we did. We headed toward Guadalajara and actually didn't make it. We got dropped off at not an abandoned gas station. We got abandoned at a gas station, and we were still hours away, even in a car from Guadalajara. And we thought, what are we going to do? And so they kind of first, the police that were kind of with us said, you might have to sleep here one night before we can figure out transportation. But in a few hours, an organization and some municipalities around that area found enough dump trucks. We were all crammed in a dump truck, like, the kind of dump truck that the walls were higher than you can see over. And we got taken just down the road and transferred on a different truck. And it took us 12 hours to go 2 hours. But we finally got to Guadalajara at 4 in the morning. And then the next day, the caravan that we split from got to Guadalajara. So these young adults were just eager to go. They thought, if we're on this ride, let's not get off, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So they just hedged their bet, and it worked out. But after that 18-wheeler or that flatbed, it was the craziest moment of the journey, where it was late at night. We're crammed into dump trucks. It's extremely cold. People could barely stand up. They were so tired. They probably might have overshot their goal, but they got there, and they all, like, every time we would transfer a different mode of transportation, they would actually wait for me. Like, they would say, Gavin, like, we're on this truck, we're going this way, because people were kind of scrambling to different trucks at that time. So they were like, they could have had every right to be like, see you, man, nice to meet you, I'm going to keep going, right? But they truly waited for me. And when we got to Guadalajara, they made me a pallet. Like, one person gave me their blanket. They never abandoned me, which is, I'm speechless to this day of why they did that.
Yeah,
so.
That's a pretty powerful experience. Let me ask you this: at any time were you ever worried for your safety while you're traveling with the caravan?
Oh man, there was one time I dropped my wallet, and this is not with my friends. I was just walking on the street, and I was kind of pulling out a phone, and I dropped out a wallet, and somebody ran up and gave it to me. And they had they didn't even know me. It wasn't like It wasn't like they knew me and they felt bad. Like, they just did not know me. We were in the crowded areas of Mexico City on the state bus stations where everybody's up against each other, and you're kind of like, oh, I should watch, my wallet, right? I never felt that way. Everybody, they were so concerned about other things. Like, stealing a wallet or a backpack wouldn't have done them any good. Like, they were not out to harm anybody, even if you had resources. In my backpack, I guess I had my passport. I had a really large kind of like battery pack for my phone, and a wallet, and an extra pair of socks. And I didn't even use those socks. I kind of forgot about them because we were traveling so quickly. So they could have taken some valuable stuff, but I left my backpack on the truck one time when I had to run to the restroom off the truck and jump off and run to the restroom. And, they could have done something with my bag, and they just handed it right back to me. Right. I mean, weirdly enough, I thought that would be a concern, and people were really worried about it. And I was too, I guess, at the start, but it turned out to be the opposite. I felt more dangerous, in San Antonio, Texas. So,
hey, so from your experience, Gavin, did you, in traveling with the caravan, did it at all make you worried for safety of U.S. citizens if the group is able to gain entry to the U.S., as they come
No, not really. I mean, here I have to clarify, on the journey, there are bad things that happen. I mean, there's thousands of people,
right.
And it's not always by the people in the caravan. You have people who take advantage of people who are traveling.
Right.
So I'm not to say that there were not pretty horrific stories that might have happened, and maybe I got lucky. But when it comes to your question about safety, do we see them as a perceived threat? No. There's nothing threatening about people who are fleeing from a country or a region that is violent and corrupt and been harassing your family, have been raping people in your family, maybe yourself, that if you don't pay off the right cartel or right corrupt police system, they'll stop protecting your family. And if you run out of money, what are you going to do? And you have to flee. And so these families, even if you saw the pictures of these strollers, how many people were pushing strollers? I don't really see a stroller as a threatening vehicle. Now, are there people in the caravan? I did not meet anybody who would cause a true harm, because when you operate in the sense and identity of a family, like they treated me on that bus, right, or on that truck,
right,
then it changes dialogue. They're pulling into Tijuana right now, and this is really, see, my Christian message in here is really not just to Americans. It's to United States of Americans. It's to Canadians. It's to people who live in Mexico. The Christian response to immigration doesn't change based on what country you live in or what politic you operate under. Like, it's pretty clear in Scripture how to treat the immigrant. And if we do it that way, even when there's a perceived lack of resources, when there is extreme poverty, when there is confusion and political confusion, it can break down walls and relationships to be peaceful, even when there's a lot of stress. And that's been quite proven throughout the journey. Now they're pulling into Tijuana, and there's videos that I watched this morning of last night where people in Tijuana, citizens of Tijuana, are screaming, "Get out of our city, get out of our country. We don't want you here. You're taking our resources. You don't belong here." And we hear that same language sometimes screamed in the United States of America. So really, the human condition and our tendency to mistreat the immigrant is kind of a universal problem. And we will see when people who have traveled a long time are pushed up against the wall, that are continually used to create fear, what the reaction will be, I don't know. That haunts me and scares me a little bit, because all of us, when we're pressed to in extreme situations, will sometimes counterreact. And so I am not fearful for anybody in that caravan who are naturally trying to seek asylum. That's almost everybody I met.
Yeah. Let me jump in there on that, because there are reports coming out of the U.S. Lots of people think that the caravan is really a massive protest as opposed to people seeking asylum. From your experience, how do you kind of discern motivations and that sort of a thing? Because those are two very different things. Obviously, people who are kind of using this as a way to protest injustice and that sort of thing, or people who are genuinely seeking asylum. So from your experience, you were in the midst of it. So what do you say? What did you observe?
No, I am not going to deny that there is a political, I would say, protest side of this. Pueblos Sin Fronteras is a group that likes to use protests to create a point. However, I think they're taking that opportunity to enlighten, just like in the civil rights movement, there was protests, and marches by faith-based leadership to highlight something else that was going on, right? It wasn't the protest itself that they were highlighting. And I think there's an element of that. And there are political aspirations probably. However, when you see hundreds and thousands of people, and they're with their family, and they're, again, pushing strollers with, I met a gentleman who was carrying a 6-month-old, a 3-year-old, and a 5-year-old all the way through Mexico and Honduras and Guatemala. That's not a typical protest. That is a desire and a determination. And then if there is a protest element, maybe, but I could not chalk it up to this is just some type of political statement. I just don't see it proven. Immigration and caravans have been happening for years and for decades, and all over the world. It's been happening forever.
No, that's helpful. That makes sense. One of the things also that we hear, even within the evangelical church here in the U.S., is, we should have compassion for the foreigner, but we also have laws. We're supposed to uphold the laws of our government, and so there's this big kind of battle in a way, like, hey, yeah, compassion, sure, but also, we want to do things kind of the legal way. What from your experience, kind of where do you see that, kind of that line, and what makes kind of the most sense, biblically speaking, as a pastor, living this out, where do you see that come together?
I'll dive into a little controversy here. I have friends on both sides of the pro-life, pro-choice movement. Right? Okay. And the same people who are often saying we should respect the laws of the land when it comes to immigration, right? I mean, I'm a Christian, but I also have to respect the law of the land. Would not most of them, and I just know the stats of political views, right? Most of them would not say, "Oh, I will honor the law of the land of abortion." They would protest, right? They wouldn't just say, "Well, I was a Christian, it's just the law. What can I do? We're supposed to be good American citizens." So no, they would never say that, right? So people are picking and choosing. People are using misunderstanding of the other, of fear attack. It's very clear. I mean, if somebody said you're an immigrant, political policy. I'm just talking about the general phrase. And then somebody says, but at the end of it, you have a good chance what comes after that but is going to be a lot of minutia, right? Like in the confusion. And I often do it I'm not perfect. I probably do that all the time in some other viewpoint, right?
Right.
So therefore, I don't know. I don't buy that. Are we supposed to respect the laws of the land, meaning like don't murder, honor speeding, honor the taxes and those things, give to Caesar what to Caesar? Yes, like that's what it's talking about. But if there is an injustice and you find it injustice, as Christians, I don't think we don't worship a kingdom of presidents. We worship a King of Kings, and that's Jesus Christ. And so, and then different Christians have different opinions about that. So I'm not trying to say one viewpoint is better than the other. But by using that phrase and then hiding behind it sometimes, but not other times, that's when it becomes a problem. Right. If that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think this kind of goes back to the root of why one of the motivations you shared with us that you went down there was to listen and to dialogue. And I think that's true within our own country, right? Whenever we need to listen to one another, even within the church, because like you said, there are different viewpoints. And so we need to be able to listen in a way that's, genuine and respectful as we have these conversations, as we have these dialogues, as we try to discern exactly how God is at work in the midst of everything that we're facing. Because just like you said, we all admit we don't always get it right, but our heart should be in a place where we're seeking the guidance from God so that we can honor him as best we can in every situation that we face, no matter how small or how big. And so I think one of the things that we see in this is there is a lot of conversation going on, but there may not be a lot of listening, genuine listening to one another going on. So let me ask you this, Gavin, before we have to end our time here. What do you sense is the role of a pastor or minister in the midst of things like misinformation, in the midst of, kind of these not so much dialogues that are taking place, but just people kind of spouting off their viewpoint?
Sure.
Where do we as pastors fall in the midst of all this? Because we have people, not only do we as ministers perhaps have differing opinions on some of this, but people that God's entrusted to our care, our flock, they're trying to discern this as well. So how do we as pastors really kind of speak into this, and how do we provide some leadership and some guidance?
Well, when you're speaking about a pastoring of a specific congregation or parish, that has to be discerned by the pastor, right? I mean, the pastor will know its flock. They'll know how to navigate those channels. Some churches are more united fronts than others. Some churches are kind of a moderate mix, right?
Right.
That's actually, for the moderate mix, it's a lot harder, right?
Exactly.
My church is pretty clearly on one side of the fence, at least on most of these social issues. But when it comes to like social media, even when I saw postings of people I went to church with post images from 2012 saying that it was the part of the Migrant Caravan. Now, here's the thing. I gave them the benefit of the doubt. Like, okay, they thought that was true. They posted it. Obviously fear can dictate a lot of things, right? When my friends, both faith-based and non-faith-based, because I was traveling, so I never saw all the responses. I trust me, I saw them now. Like trolls come out of the woodwork, and both sides were very aggressive to each other in some ways. However, when some groups were kind of like moderate, like, hey, we love you, but we Googled, reverse imaged, searched this image, and it has nothing to do with the caravan. It was actually 2012 at a student protest, and you're creating a false narrative, right?
Right.
Like when that was like completely proven, like there's no doubt that happened. Even after speaking to police, I even asked and showed that images to police officers down there, and they're like, no, that's not happened. And they said this has been almost 99% drama free. I don't know if that will remain the same in Tijuana, but the journey itself. And they said early on there was a few scuffles with a handful of people. When you have 15,000 people, 6,000 people, depending on where you were on the journey, that's not surprising, right?
Right.
But yet we don't let our cooler heads see that. We just jump on it. And so when this information was presented to the said people, I thought they would say, okay, we'll delete it. We might still have our point of view of immigration, but we'll we'll take the hit and we'll delete the post. Like people doubled down. They said, no, it doesn't matter. The story is still true. The image might be not be true, but I'm not. Like they were like just defiant not to take it down. And that's what kind of startled me, because I have actually deleted posts before. I have said some things online the last 10 years that you're like, okay, that was overreaching.
Yeah.
And you delete it, or you leave it up and you apologize.
Right.
It's actually bolder to leave it up, right?
Right.
In some ways, unless it's extremely damaging. And what's sad is I've seen that thing shared since then from the same source, so it's still getting out there. So I think that's their intention is to, we're going to create a narrative, and it's fuzzy truth, but
right.
if it gets our truth across, we win, or we feel like we win. That's a little scary. So as a pastor, how do you counter that direct of a lie? Oof. Like, I think you say it in love. I mean, if you look back on how I responded to those things, I think the closest thing I said, honestly, y'all quoted me, I think I said it's garbage, right?
Right.
I think that's the meanest I got. But it in a way, it's kind of clear. And even my most conservative, diehard, pro, whatever, strictest immigration law people are, most of them would even look at that image and say, okay, that's not good, right? So it does surprise me that there is an element out there. And I don't know if that's the rhetoric of just kind of like our political climate on both sides of the extremes that just say, well, if it gets our point across, that's what wins. And unfortunately, as a pastor, I think you can speak up against that. I think you can use your prophetic voice and say, no, absolutely not. We can debate, we can talk, we can go have dialogue groups. I do this thing called pub theology, where we bring in all different religious, theological, and political viewpoints to come and speak at pub theology. Those things can be appropriate, but when you see just a flat out misinformation,
right.
that's not even like debatable, and then people say, well, that doesn't matter, then that's something I feel like as pastors you have every right to call out, just like you have all the other sins that we like to call out.
Yeah.
I think we're in the business of calling out sin. At least I still hope that's still a little bit about what we do. So, to me, some of it's like that. Now, can we do it in love? Can we do it not as aggressively? Can I do that better? Obviously.
Excellent. Gavin, thank you so much for sharing a little bit about your journey. Just we're getting ready to close down, and so I just want to give you an opportunity, if there's something, again, pastors, ministry leaders are the ones listening in right now, if there's something you'd like to say to your colleagues, to your fellow pastors, kind of about this issue or your experience, whatever it is, what encouragement would you leave with them?
Yeah, well, first of all, get involved in whether denomination group. There's many denominations, the Methodists, Presbyterians, the Lutherans, Catholics, all have different refugee services and organizations that offer legal aid. Get involved in that. Get involved with the Interfaith Welcome Coalition. You can Google them. They have relationships with bus stations all over the country that you can honestly direct your congregants to serve. Apart from that, though, when it comes to this issue, I really don't see a divide between the liberal, conservative, and moderate church. I know those words aren't perfect, but for the lack of a better term. I know friends, John Garland, a Mennonite pastor who is in San Antonio, a fantastic voice for immigrants, is a pastor of a progressive church. However, he has some of his best friends in the immigration movement are from some of the Assemblies of Gods and the non-denominational churches, Bible churches that have different, kind of conservative theological viewpoints. But he said that if we don't stay in our liberal conservative camps, he has gotten people together, at least in our area, and it's been a game changer because most everyone, for the most part, at least with the pastoral voice, it's a pretty easy place to fall after we get rid of the politics. It's pretty easy. So if we can unite and use our voice, think about it. If the conservative voice and the liberal voice came together for just a few issues,
right?
Think how powerful those issues could be. We saw it with the separations of families, right? When the progressives started saying separation of families, bad, 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 people were like, okay, of course you're going to say that. But then when the Southern Baptists wrote a letter, when people saying, no, this has to stop, no matter what our political sides are, it noticed that when those denominations came together and united, what was it, like a week later, the executive order was passed?
Yeah, there's a lot to be said about unity and within the church, and how do we, because somebody outside the church see divisiveness and they just kind of label the church with divisiveness. And so if there's way that we can express unity around something, and like you said, this is one of those issues that we as the church, capital C church, regardless if we have, a little different theological streams or interpretations, that this is something that we should all be able to rally around.
I mean, it happened in South Africa, and it happened in apartheid. It happened when churches just realize, when it comes to issues of poverty and homelessness, right? Even in mission work, there's so many things that we unite on to get a lot of things done. We can do this for immigration. I really don't see a political hang up for any pastor, really. There might be some congregants that might get upset, but for real controversy, for a pastor, I see the political maneuvering or the capital that might be lost is very low.
Right. And it presents a discipling opportunity as well. Like you said, with congregants who might think differently. I mean, this is an opportunity to get very biblical and to disciple our people as well.
Exactly. And so I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I see this as a pretty clear, and I've even seen it, the people who shared your post, your article, have been some of my most conservative friends and my most liberal friends.
That's cool.
So, to me, I think it's not, I almost am almost done debating it, because there really isn't nothing to debate. It seems to me pretty clear. And if conservative and liberal and moderate theologians and pastors can kind of come to agreement, we need to stop talking and just say, okay, this is our stance, and we're moving on,
Yeah, that's good, brother. Thank you for sharing your story and giving us kind of a first-hand account, because most everything we experience is obviously, for someone kind of looking from the outside in, but you went and, got right in the midst of it and had the opportunity to develop those relationships and to hear stories and to get that sense of what was really happening. So thank you for taking the time to be with us today and sharing with our listeners. Certainly appreciate it.
All right. You guys do great work, and I respect all you do. And I can't wait to follow ChurchLeaders.com more. I knew about y'all before, but I've now been introduced to y'all in full relationship. So thank you so much, and continue to just really engaging truth and uniting really the church. You do a great job of uniting the different angles of the church. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, brother. Certainly appreciate it. God bless you, Gavin. I appreciate you taking the time to be with us on this week's episode. Every week, as we are putting the episodes together, we're thinking of you, our pastors and ministry leaders, and striving to provide insightful and inspiring interviews as you seek to grow as a kingdom leader. So we hope you're finding value from the Church Leaders podcast, and if so, we'd certainly appreciate you taking a few moments to head over to iTunes and leave us a review. Your positive reviews and ratings help other church leaders more easily find our podcasts, so they too can benefit from these interviews. Again, we thank you in advance, and if you have any comments, any questions, suggestions, or ideas for guests, I would love to hear from you. You can send me an email to podcast@ChurchLeaders.com, or you can connect with me on Twitter. Finally, you can find this podcast as well as other great faith-based podcasts on the FaithPlay app. It's available for both Apple and Android, and so we encourage you to check that out as well. So until next time, this is Jason Day, encouraging you to love well and lead well.
You've been listening to the Church Leaders Podcast. For articles, videos, and free resources that will help you lead better every day, visit our website at ChurchLeaders.com. Thanks for listening.